Well, folks, welcome back to another episode of Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. Tom and I are here again, and we're going to be talking about visual images and graphics and web content. Really, how do we take images, how do we make our websites better or more effective with conversions utilizing images? So, Tom, there's a couple things that we want to start with, and let's number one, why have images on your page?
Well, the web is a visual platform. It always has been, and that's what it is first. And it's becoming more and more visual over time with video gradually starting to take over. But what I want to focus on in the podcast today is the idea of images and graphics to communicate a message. And I think the first thing that I wanted to say here is that it's always the message that's important. It's not the image or the graphic. And a lot of times we tend to get so caught up in the cool photo we took or the cool image we've come up with or graphic and lose sight of the fact that without the message behind that, it's really just eye candy. It has no strategic purpose. So I think that we've got to start using more images and graphics because that's what the kind of medium that the web is, but we have to make sure that there's a message tied to those that actually makes sense and is in alignment with your business strategy. Otherwise, it's just clutter. And in fact, to cut through all that clutter of images and so forth, you've got to have a great message, a message that makes sense for your users. And that's what we're going to talk about today in the podcast.
No, I mean, really, can they? How often do images help with conversions?
Well, here's the thing about images and conversions is that because images will catch people's attention, will engage them on your website or in your social media, that's what you want the images to do, is to get the first level of engagement. And then the content with that image then will build on the engagement and bring people deeper into your website. So in some ways, images are the things that attract the eye, attract attention, and pull people in. But then their job is not as powerful. Then their job needs to not to be all-encompassing, because at that point, the user does need to see more valuable content and get deeper into the content of the website. So in some way, images and graphics become the fish hook that reels in the fish, but the content itself has to be there to support the whole process.
Well, what about just putting up video? I know a lot of times, if we go back to the old PowerPoint days, you go back and it's like you have to have an image in there, so it's not just text up on a screen. When you're looking at it from that standpoint, does it matter what image you put up? Because I mean, we talk about images, and we could be talking about logos, we can talk about just a graphical element, or we can talk about photos. How do you choose the right one? How do you know that it's the right image to use for the message you want to get across?
No, it's critical that you know that, and it's all based on the target market. So this is another part of the use of images, is the idea that you don't use images just to use the images. Use them to connect with your specific target market. And so our podcasts are for businesses that are looking to market online and improve their results, right? The number one use of images and graphics right now is usually in social media with people communicating with other people. So it's consumers talking to one another. That's very different from the use of images with a business. So a business has to use images in a way that connects with their target market and makes sense. And what we've seen is that most businesses make the big mistake of putting together images and graphics that make sense for the designer, right, or the company itself, as opposed to the people who are going to be watching or using that image or reading that image or whatever they're doing with it. And that's why it's so important that you really focus on the images and graphics to communicate what your brand is about and to tell stories about your brand. And examples of that might be, let's say if you're in the construction business, and let's say one of the things that you're really well known for is your response time or your ability to get out on the site really quick. So you want to see images of your trucks. You want to see images of transportation, images of efficiency, images of how quick you are to respond. Those tie in then with your brand and your strategy and make sense, and also engage people that are looking for that. You wouldn't want just standard construction images there because it doesn't support your brand as well. And then all of those images, if they have the right caption and they tell the right story, then they reinforce your brand, they improve conversions, and they become things that draw people to you and draw them into your website and your social media.
No, is there things? I mean, because here's the biggest thing: is there's throughout the last couple of years, it's been very very clear that blog posts, you know, if you go in and go, how do I do my blog? It's like, well, you've got to have photos in there. You've got to have some type of imaging in your blog post to get your messaging across. And so everybody always has images. I know a lot of times I come back through and see, is it the right image? Is it not the right image? Does it get the message of the blog post across? And obviously that falls right over to what you were saying. If you've got a company, you see trucks, you want to see speed, what does that mean? So what else can be done? I mean, what about captions with those images?
Well, we said this in the podcast before. Any image or any graphic should have a caption with it, because if you don't have a caption with it, then people will make up their own mind on what they think that's about. And so what we recommend is, if you're using photographs and photography, the best caption you can have is just tell us what that photo is about and why it's on the website. If you're using images or photography for your brand, then develop a tagline that supports that image. And it's the same thing with graphics and so forth. And on the web, on your website, you're going to use the most effective use of images and visuals on your website are going to be on your home page, on your key landing pages, and in your social media, maybe even in your email marketing. I think images on blogs are okay, but I don't think people come to blogs to see images.
Unless it's a photography blog. That's the only reason.
That's right. Unless the blog is specifically about that image, or the image is used to tell a story in the blog, then that's good. But placing an image in a blog just as kind of eye candy is not. It's okay. I mean, I'm not going to say don't do it. I think it's okay. But the images are much more effective on the key landing pages, or the first time a user engages with that part of your website. It could be a first-time visitor, or it could be just the first time they've landed on that page.
Right. Now, are there certain ones that we should, certain images that people should avoid, or some types of images people should embrace? I mean, perhaps we can probably look at it by either by target market or by industry.
Oh, I think that it's a wide open palette. It really just depends on your industry and your marketplace and being appropriate for your industry. And that's, we've talked about this in other podcasts. So as you're building your web marketing team, everyone has to be aligned with the strategy for the company. And probably the person that needs the most alignment is going to be the graphic designer, because their job and their challenge is to visually communicate to your target market what your strategy is all about. And
Right.
Second to that person would be your photographer, your videographer, and so forth. They cannot be in their own head as far as what works. They have to be in your head and in your strategy. And what the web is doing right now, which is a really interesting trend, is that it's being inundated with visual images. I mean, even Facebook, social media posts, everything is now being driven by visual images. And YouTube is continuing to grow and explode. And there's several new tools that are coming out, and we're seeing these tools coming up every day, where you can go and grab really inexpensive resources or even free resources to build this visual palette that you want to have. And there's a couple tools I want to talk about. One's called Powtoon, and it's found at powtoon.com, and the other one is Canva, which is found at canva.com.
Now, Powtoon isn't that more like a graphical animation type thing where you do animations?
Right. Powtoon is an animation building website, and the reason that I think animated videos are important on the web is because a lot of people sell intangible services or products. There are things that for example, a service needs to be described, it needs to be explained visually, and that's what Powtoon does so well and so simply. In fact, Powtoon kind of forces you to do a very simple, direct message with a nice little comical twist to it, which I think is very important in today's internet marketing, especially in internet marketing content world.
Right.
And then what Canva does is Canva allows you to build graphics and clip art photography with messaging in just a few seconds. In just a few minutes, you can build a graphic with a message on it or a photo with a caption on it. And these things, I think, are critical on the web, and that's why we're starting to see these resources pop up. I encourage our listeners to go check out these sites and figure out how they can be of use for you.
Because they are free. They're free resources, and that's probably one of the biggest things to look out, because whenever you're getting something new, it could be the flavor of the day. Obviously, online, things change so quickly. There's new resources, there's new social networks, there's new things that come out all the time. And as business owners, we always look to find out, are we following a trend, or the new fad of the day, or are we actually doing something that's useful that's going to move our marketing initiatives forward?
That's right, and they're free. They are free resources, but just keep in mind that to get more expanded functionality, you pay. But usually, these resources are less than $100 a month. They're fairly inexpensive for the kind of return you get. But they do require a graphic designer's eye. I mean, they're not. These are not the kinds of resources that anyone can just get in there and throw things together. You need to have a graphic designer that has an eye for placement and use of colors and things like that. But they're great resources, and they just show. I mean, both of these websites have millions of users. It just shows the impact and importance of visual messaging on the web.
So, what are the key items that our viewers and listeners can take from this podcast?
Well, I have a few action items for everyone here, and I think that just being aware of the fact that you've got to be visual in how you communicate, and that you use visual imagery to draw people in, to tell a brief story, and then get them to engage with your traditional content. Action item number one is to find a graphic designer you can work with that understands your strategy and that can communicate that strategy, and push the designer to make the strategy happen. If you're not getting that, then you need to find another designer or train this person to do it better.
And they need to do that with your marketing, with either your marketing person if you have one, or with yourself, going, here's where the long-term strategy is going. So
right.
Then they understand.
It's part of a team. It's part of a team of people that work on the website. Absolutely. Make sure every image and graphic on the site has a purpose and has a caption. We've talked about this before. Be very direct with your captions. So don't try to get esoteric, or don't try to just get, use fluffy marketing content on your graphic.
Right. Be
very direct and explain what we're looking at if it's a picture, and if it's a graphic, make sure your tagline or your slogan's associated with it. And then find a balance between the use of images and content so that images don't overwhelm your site or confuse people, which is something that's also on the downside of this. And keep in mind, you can track all the views for all your images, all your pages with images. All of this is tracked in Google Analytics. You can measure the effectiveness. If you see high bounce rates, then that image is not working. Check out Powtoon and Canva.com, which will have links on our website. And then, of course, make sure every image and every graphic is coded in the alt tag for SEO under your key terms. We think that more and more, because of the growth of images and the use of Google to find images, you're going to see good SEO results by tagging all of these things properly.
The other thing, the one last thing on Powtoon, and something for all of our viewers and listeners to know, is make sure that you're coding everything as well on your videos on YouTube, because Powtoon will let you export, and you can do export. If you're loading that Powtoon up to YouTube, make sure that you've got all of your tagging and everything done appropriately there when you embed that video into your website.
That's an excellent point. In fact, when I think about the use of visual images and graphics and web content, I am thinking globally, and YouTube is probably one of the most important websites for the videos on the planet. But keeping in mind that all the social media now is driven by visual, and keeping the visuals strategic, keeping them aligned with what your business is about, supporting your brand, will make these things work for you on any social media platform.
Well, folks, that's it for visual images and graphics in web content. Thanks so much, Tom, and thanks for joining us here today for this Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast.